I've lost count as to how many times I caught myself dreaming in my sleep, and yet had little to no control over what was going to happen next. Even though I fully knew that I was dreaming. It's all a dream, I said to myself, probably with a smug expression on my randomly dream-generated face. But even with that knowledge, it was impossible to not be afraid of what was going to happen to me next, because everything simply felt too real. So real, in fact, that I could not separate the dream from reality. Whenever I catch myself dreaming, I'll run up to a stranger and ask him whether he or she realizes that they're dreaming. And they usually say, "Duh, of course they're dreaming," and I'm only a figment of their imagination. One time I even held out a piece of fabric and asked a stranger to touch it, then tell me if it felt any different from real life. They gave me this weird look as if the answer couldn't have been any more obvious. Of course, they couldn't tell the difference when they brushed their fingers across the red netting, and neither could I. Apparently, I'm also a loser in my dreams as well, because most people I harass in my sleep usually abruptly end the conversation and walk away after I ask them a couple of very harmless questions regarding existence and the nature of reality, just like how I do it in real life. After what felt like a couple of hours passed by, I started to forget that I was in a dream, and I started to live my dream as though it was my new reality. I soon forgot my old identity and began to assume this new image of myself, whatever it might look like. Events unfolded around me, and I reacted to them exactly how this new me would react to situations. One moment I was helpless in a building of a deserted city, shrouded in a sea of shadows with not a single soul in sight. The next moment I was bouncing off buildings and running away from something. The laws of physics changed every single minute and nothing made sense. But I never bothered enough to question the logic of the dream anymore. In fact, I was taking it all very seriously. Everything was also very real, to me. At least it was real until I woke up. So what makes something real? Why do we always have this burning desire to separate the unreal from the real? Like an itch inside an organ that we can't reach. If something feels real, it might as well be real. That's how we usually describe something as vivid. It's when our imagined experience is so potent that it becomes real. If our existence is always so real in our experience, then why the need to separate the real from the unreal? Teachers from Buddhist, Advaita, or any other non-dual traditions have to constantly remind us that this reality is also an illusion, and there is a higher reality out there somewhere that we cannot perceive. I know that the absolute truth in Buddhism and Vedanta does not point toward a higher reality, but the highest reality. A finite God can always have a higher God that he can or cannot perceive, but the absolute Brahman, the absolute nothingness or the all, the everythingness can have nothing other than itself. The only contention I have with Eastern philosophies is the idea that absolute reality has to be limited to being either a temporal dream or an eternal, immutable reality. What's beyond the spectrum of real and unreal? Nobody knows. But that shouldn't stop existence from coming up with new attributes on its own. And there's no reason why the list should be a finite number either. Anyway, you might argue against the idea that we should not try to take our dreams for reality, because dreams are ultimately false, and we should uphold the truth. That dreams are a fabrication of the brain, and it's how the brain processes information stored throughout the day, etc. It would be wrong to assume that dreams are identical to reality, because dreams only exist in the brain. On the other hand, our material world exists because it is made of matter, so it stays around for a very long time, and doesn't just arbitrarily disappear into nothingness, unlike the dreams we wake up from every night. In other words, reality is something that is unchanging. Reality is made of physical laws that are consistent at every point and in every corner of the universe. The only reason why we're still alive and have all of these technologies is thanks to the fact that we were able to understand some of these physical laws and work with them to our advantage. That's what you'd call science. Without science, there'd be no houses, no computers, no electricity, no food, no clean water, no philosophical discussions on the internet, no art and no memes. Without scientific knowledge, our civilization wouldn't be here and I'd simply drop dead. I owe my entire existence and all my comforts to science itself. But like the ingrate that bites the hands of his own benefactor, I must now turn my back on science and tell you straight up that we will never be able to tell whether the world we're living in right now is absolutely real or unreal, and that it's wrong to conclude that this is a reality no matter how much evidence we have to support that claim. Why? Because all things that are unreal have the potential to be real, and all things real are capable of becoming its opposite. I've already told you how I could not tell dreams from reality. The only times where I can remind myself that my dreams are not real are when I'm actually awake throughout the day. You can try to convince yourself that you know when you're dreaming and when you're not dreaming. The moment you lay down on your bed and shut your eyes, you won't be making that distinction any longer.
Wait, this isn't right! No, I mean, we did this already!
How many times have you gotten carried away in your dreams and acted as though the events and people in them were so important, and your actions actually mattered, even though you were literally in Middle-earth, and Sauron was trying to crash the Death Star into the Shire? When you're dreaming, your mental faculties are not as sharp as your waking state, and your experiences are not as intense and as detailed compared to your day-to-day life. But you won't be making any complaints or drawing comparisons to the real world, because as long as you're asleep, your dream is your reality, no matter how illogical and stupid it is. Tell me this: if dreams are so fake, then why do you need to constantly remind yourself of that simple fact every time you wake up, or every time you catch yourself dreaming or having a nightmare? The fakeness should be self-evident and doesn't need to compare itself against anything, such as the real world that we live in. And how can the real hold the potential to become an illusion? Simple: through the eyes of an outside observer. In the event that we're living inside a simulation, all that we've taken for granted to be absolute reality will turn out to be an emulation on someone else's computer. If it turns out we're inside a simulation, we come to the realization that we never existed. Remember when I talked in another video about how we're all NPCs? The concept of selfhood, or the idea of the self, and how we exist as individuals separated from the outside world, could very well be an illusion. There's no such thing as a self. There's only the natural world existing by itself. And if the simulation theory is confirmed in the future, there's only the emulation existing by itself. But that's not the only way our reality can quickly turn into another schizophrenic episode in the eyes of someone or something else. According to the Buddhist philosophy, the world is made out of nothingness. When we look at our hand in front of us, we're not looking at anything. We're not looking with our eyes either. Our eyes don't exist, and we don't exist. There's literally nothing in front of us. We just like to think that we're looking at our hand inside a room on a planet floating in space, because that's what the emptiness wants to convey to itself, even though nothing exists, not even empty space itself. If you never had a body, and you can't feel what's in front of you, would it make a difference whether this emptiness is infinite in size, or whether it is compressed to a single point? You can't feel your body, you can't feel movement, and you can't see anything. In that case, space might as well doesn't exist. You might ask, what's the point of these theories when you can't prove them? You can come up with 1 billion theories, but they're all speculation at the end of the day. The world is only interested in hard facts and empirical data, because at least then we can be confident that the laws of physics will always stay consistent and won't turn on its head on a whim. I'm here to tell you that all of those ideas about reality being an illusion could all be wrong. I never said that our reality is ultimately unreal, only that it has the potential to be unreal, just like how our dreams are illusory. It is impossible to prove that the world is unreal, just like how it is impossible to prove to the people in your dream that you and they, as well as the whole dream world, don't exist. You don't have to prove to them anything. You just have to wake up, and the whole dream world and all of its history, along with your dream avatar, will cease to exist. At the same time, it is also impossible to prove that the world we live in currently are ultimately real, simply because our technologies, theorems, equations, and human intellect are part of existence, and not something outside of it. The only way to confirm that the sky is blue is to find an exit out of the cave. If we're destined to be stuck in the cave for all eternity, then the sky might as well doesn't exist. In conclusion, I have my own agendas, and they involve 3 things. The real and the unreal are interchangeable, and anything that is considered absolute reality can become illusory, and vice versa, when the right set of circumstances presents itself. Second, just be careful the next time someone, such as myself, tells you what reality is all about, because no one has a clue. Go ask any scientist what they think about the subject, and they'll tell you straight up that they simply don't know. You'll be amazed and somewhat moved by how extremely humble and honest their responses can be. The real OG scientists will tell you that they don't know anything. Nothing. It takes one single discovery to topple a 1,000-year-old theorem. Only the layman will run around telling people what we know actually amounts to anything, and our knowledge is absolute truth. And finally, remember when I said how there's a chance that all dualities and pluralities can have an infinite number of other unknown attributes in the same spectrum? The real and the unreal are a very fundamental duality, and my proposal is, what if there is a third and infinitely many more vectors that exist on this spectrum? I don't know what they are, but it's something worth thinking about.